So welcome back to another video. Today in this video we're going to be looking at a short recap of Leeds United's loss to Burnley this weekend and then looking ahead to Friday night's fixture at home to West Ham United. So just as a little brief introduction, of course, Leeds United lost in the previous weekend to Burnley. Now it was a game in which, something definitely went wrong for Leeds. The selection wasn't right. The performance wasn't up to the standards that we expect. And Daniel Farke, in my opinion, he did get a lot wrong in terms of the team selection. However, it's key to remember that based on the players that we had available and the summer that we had, it wasn't entirely down to him due to us having so much lack of depth in the attack. Of course, Daniel Farke pleaded for more signings in the summer. He didn't get them, and it showed when we were struggling to create any sort of real chance this weekend, with the likes of Brendan Aronson and Jack Harrison being the starting attackers alongside Calvert-Lewin. Daniel James saw himself return to the 11 after he returned from a pretty lengthy spell out. And it's another player which you think probably walks straight into the team based on the injuries that we've got at the moment. Obviously, Willie Gnonto may or may not be fit for the tie against West Ham, and Noah Okafor may return before that point. We are yet to find out. However, looking into it in a bit more deeper, you know, a lot of the fan bases, in my opinion, overreacted to that result. It was a poor result, it was a poor performance, and definitely not what we expected or what should have been the outcome, in my opinion. It was a must-win game, and we absolutely capitulated on the Saturday afternoon. However, Burnley, they played well, they deserved all the points, and it was a wonder strike. And for the second goal, and then for the first one, it was an inch perfect cross and a perfectly timed header. You know, they're not poor goals to concede, but there were still mistakes which led into them. First goal, Carl Darlow, of course, kicked the ball out of play, looked like he was trying to find the fullback, and it just was a poor distributed ball out wide. Went out for a throw in, and that just meant Burnley threw it back in, and Kyle Walker put in a great ball into the box. And, the second goal again, Darlow was a bit off his line to some people. However, I do think there's not much he could have done about that. It was a chance and a goal which I think no keeper in the Premier League would have saved that. And it was something which sort of a freak goal where you just got to stand up and applaud based on how good the execution of the finish was. So when you actually look at it, a lot of the fan base are, criticising Farker, and, rightly so. He's made some bad decisions, deserves his criticism. A lot of things he said after the game didn't make too much sense to me. Like in the press conference, he mentioned how we were the leading team on the metrics for the night and stats. We had the better stats. But at the end of the day, there's only one stat that matters, and that is who scores the most goals, because that's who gets the win. And that's the stat that we lost in. So, it's all well and good saying that we were amazing in this stat, in this metric, all these stats going for us. Yet, it doesn't mean anything if we don't get the results. So I think Daniel Farke has shot himself in the foot there, trying to compare us to teams who maybe would have got that finish and would have got that win away. Whereas, we haven't got that quality in the team, and that's becoming more and more evident. Obviously, the early weeks in the Premier League, we noticed that we were struggling to create. However, it's something which hasn't really happened since. And when you take a look at the different perspectives of the Leeds United fan base, it's something which has got a very lot of different opinions. Obviously, you got many people who are backing Farke all the way, who think that he's not doing a bad job and that he's working the best with the tools that he's been given. And that's a fair argument to make. He demanded for more people to come in attack. He said we need more players in attack, and he wasn't given them. So it's easy to say that he's just working with what he's been given. Some people might say he's doing that, but he's not doing enough with them. Again, I think that's a fair argument in some aspects. Calvert-Lewin, he's had a lot of injuries recently. However, he has proven himself at this level. I think we need to do more to be playing to his strengths rather than the team, because at the end of the day, he's the one that's going to get you the 15, 20 goals a season if you can get it right. And he's a player which, when he is on form, when he is on his game, easily he's got enough to keep us in the league on his own. Um, Obviously, now looking ahead, it's difficult because it's getting very toxic amongst some fans. Not all, a lot of fans are still quite level-headed about it. They realise that it's not entirely on that Farke's shoulders, and it's something which, he can't be helped because, at the end of the day, he wasn't fully backed in the summer. So, a lot of people are quite level-headed in that aspect and, realising that that's the case. However, it's something which isn't going to be given long for Farke. You've already seen what the 49ers are like in Rangers. Didn't work with Russell Martin. Obviously, completely different. He was terrible up there, but it took them a long time to sack him. And that shows that maybe with Farke, they're not going to be as ruthless as some people may think. So it looks like Farke is maybe around to stay. Maybe at least gone January, maybe for the whole season, regardless. You just never know. Um, Whether he keeps us up in mind, that's another question. I've seen people drafting shortlists for managers they would want in ahead of him as of now, which I think is crazy. Again, it was a bad result, but come on, we can't win every game. We're not going to win every game. You look at the teams already that have been played, we've taken points off Everton and we've lost to Burnley. Before the season, obviously, you'd have been absolutely fuming that we're losing to Burnley. But if you just said we beat Burnley, we lose to Everton, you're thinking somewhat expected, can't really argue with that. So I think a bit of perspective's needed with that. And like you say, we've still got some very winnable games coming up. Obviously, West Ham this weekend, Forest soon as well. So two games there which could very easily look like, 6 points if we really are working towards a team which, we've got more of our attackers back in it and we're working towards a system which works more and better for the team that we've got, including Calvert-Lewin in there. Obviously, Brighton's mixed in those two results as well, which, isn't going to be easy. I wouldn't be surprised if we just lose that game. But, we'll give anyone a game most weeks, where we can get a draw. That's definitely a possibility. So, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's not the end of the road. And there's certainly a lot to come from Farke's team. Something which I would definitely suggest is there's many changes that need to be made for Friday. And just on the topic of that, that's something which, we need to talk about. So it's like, how do we go into the next few weeks in next matches and gain some momentum, especially against West Ham this week? Now, of course, there's a lot to talk about. We've got the aspect of the players that should come into the team. We've also got it's like lots of different aspects of the team. If I just share my screen here, we've got the West Ham's current fixtures. Here they go. They've not been playing great. Look at that. I mean, no wins in the last five. Obviously, tonight they've just lost to Brentford as I'm recording this, and it was a very, very bad game. So, Nuno's not torn up any trees since going there, so it could easily look like a game which you're thinking, if they can, put a decent team together, Leeds, they could easily get a result here. On paper, they've got a good team. Paqueta, Bowen, and Somerville. We know what they're all about. Souček in the past has had really good games against Leeds, and Kyle Walker-Peters, an experienced man at this level, alongside Max Kilman as well. And Areola in goal, has played in the Premier League for a good few years now, so we know what he's about. Again, it's a team which, on paper, you don't think should be where it is. However, because of the poor ownership and management and the poor recruitment in the last few years, they've found themselves sat around the bottom half of the bottom end of the table, and it's a shame, really. So looking at the game, there's some changes I would like to make, and this is probably my team that I would go with going into the game. Of course, the only change in there that I would probably make if he's fit is Willie Gnonto for Dan James. However, based on what's expected to be, this is the team that I would go for. There's more players which I do think could look crucial come towards the next few games. Jacoby all coming into the team to potentially make his debut would be a key one. And I think Tanaka returning to the side after his injury definitely is something which needs to happen and probably should have happened a long time ago. With the Anton Stack dropping out the team and Lucas Perry as well. Again, good keeper, solid keeper, but he's just, Darlow. I'm a massive fan of Darlow, but like people have been saying, we signed Perry to be our number one, so we can't really not play him. Does that make sense? So again, all in all, I think they're all very fair arguments. I mean, when you look at the head-to-head of Leeds United versus West Ham, it's not looking pretty for Leeds. One win in the last, God, in the last however many, in the last eight, sorry, if I could read that one there, but one in the last eight is not good when we need a win. But, we're given West Ham's current form, it's potential to change that. And, not many would have expected this result. So it's definitely one where we can pick up some points given the opportunity. Now, if we're being honest, massive game against West Ham coming up, a game in which Leeds cannot afford to lose based on the previous performances. It's one which, we could very easily win. However, if we turn up like we did against Burnley, or in some cases not turn up, then it'll prove to be very difficult. So, as you know, that this is really important now that we really do pick up some points against West Ham. We haven't picked up many points this season, so we do need to start picking more up along the way. You look at Sunderland on 13 or 14 points, which is ridiculous. We're on 8, I think, at the minute. So, we need to start making some way. And that Burnley game should have been a game where we really started to do that. Post-international break, players should be back fresh as they can be. So make sure we make them changes in the team. Daniel Farke, please just change something, something just to give us a new lease of life. Make sure you get those influencing attackers in the pitch. Unfortunately, I think we've seen the end of Brendan Aronson at the moment. I think like I said, Dan James and Noah Okafor if he's fit. But if he's not, then I think you will see Brendan Aronson, unless Willie Gnonto somehow comes back to fitness within a week or two. So if we can get all those in, I do think it's going to give us a right good chance going forward. And yeah, that's not much I can say. And of course, the Elland Road atmosphere will forever be something which helps us this season. I think it will be a decider in many games. So I think we should be very confident going into the match. And, Nuno Espirito Santo not had a great start to his West Ham career. So I think there's definitely some points to be had here. So let's bring it on. Let's bring it on. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. Bit of a weird one, bit of a different one. Not too long, only 15 minutes or so, and just covering the basics of those games. So make sure you're liking and you're commenting and you're subscribing. And I do hope to catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.